The camera caught Aryna saying something in frustration, which one fan through lip reading interpreted as "once a year, even a stick shoots." So this apparently is a Russian idiom, which essentially means the same thing as "even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while." And Aryna said the same exact thing, "once a year, even a stick shoots," back in 2023 during the US Open final against Madison Keys after the American bageled her in the opening set. And in my opinion, Sabalenka was
The 2025 WTA Finals in Riyadh was supposed to be a celebration of the year's best tennis. Instead, it turned into one of the most controversial moments in recent tennis history. Elena Rybakina absolutely dominated Aryna Sabalenka in the finals, winning in straight sets. But what happened after the match has overshadowed everything that took place on the court. According to multiple reports, Sabalenka was allegedly heard making racially charged comments about Rybakina, and the fallout has been swift and severe. The WTA is now investigating. Rybakina has made her feelings crystal clear, and the entire tennis world is asking, how did we get here? Let me take you through what actually happened, because this story goes much deeper than one match. First, let's talk about the match itself. Elena Rybakina came out firing at the WTA Finals championship match. She was hitting winners from every corner of the court, serving bombs, and Sabalenka simply had no answers. Rybakina took the first set 6-3, and then closed it out in a second set tiebreak, winning 7-6. It was a commanding performance on the biggest stage in women's tennis. Rybakina played some of the best tennis we've seen from her in over 2 years. Remember, she'd been struggling with injuries and inconsistent form throughout much of the season, but on this day in Riyadh, she looked like the player who won Wimbledon back in 2022. For Sabalenka, this had to sting. She'd been the favorite going into the tournament, playing incredible tennis in the lead-up weeks. She was the world #1, coming off a dominant season. And yet, Rybakina just dismantled her in the final. Now here's where things get complicated. During the match, cameras caught Sabalenka saying something in frustration. Fans who could read lips and understand Russian interpreted it as "once a year, even a stick shoots." If you're not familiar with Russian idioms, that essentially means the same thing as "even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while." In other words, Sabalenka appeared to be suggesting that Rybakina's victory was just a lucky fluke.
And Aryna said the same exact thing, "once a year, even a stick shoots," back in 2023 during the US Open final against Madison Keys after the American bageled her in the opening set. And in my opinion, Sabalenka was frustrated talking about now this incident with Rybakina. I think Aryna was frustrated that Elena struggled with winning a big title for over 2.5 years, and finally the Kazakhstani woman played some of her best tennis.
Interestingly enough, Sabalenka used this exact same phrase back in 2023 during the US Open final against Madison Keys, after Keys won the first set. So there's a pattern here of Sabalenka dismissing her opponent's performances when things don't go her way. But the real controversy began after the match ended. According to sources close to the situation, Sabalenka allegedly made comments that went far beyond just being a sore loser. Reports suggest she made racially charged remarks about Rybakina, expressing frustration that the Kazakhstani player had won, and suggesting the victory wasn't deserved. Now, I want to be clear here. These are allegations, and we haven't heard audio of these specific comments, but the reports have been consistent enough that the WTA has launched an investigation. What we do know for certain is what happened at the trophy ceremony. After winning the final, Rybakina made a very deliberate choice. She refused to take a photograph with the WTA CEO and with Sabalenka. This wasn't some accidental snub or a case of missing the photo opportunity. Rybakina, who is typically one of the most composed and reserved players on tour, made a conscious decision to protest what had been happening behind the scenes. Tennis journalist Ben Rothenberg commented on this moment, noting that Rybakina is not a particularly expressive player. She didn't do cartwheels after winning match point. She's known for keeping her emotions in check. So for her to publicly refuse to acknowledge the WTA in this way was a rare glimpse into just how upset she was about the entire situation.
Seems to be some issue.
This is a player who doesn't give up much. I don't know if you saw her reaction on match point. Not exactly cartwheels. This is not a player who's particularly expressive. So that gesture, basically not acknowledging the WTA, was actually a rare glimpse into her personality.
Now, this isn't the first time Sabalenka's conduct after losses has raised eyebrows. Let's go back to earlier this year at the Australian Open final. Sabalenka lost to Madison Keys in that match, and afterwards she allegedly made similar dismissive remarks about Keys' performance. The pattern that's emerging here is troubling. When Sabalenka loses big matches, she seems to struggle with giving her opponents credit for playing well. Take the 2023 US Open final against Coco Gauff. After losing that match, Sabalenka said in her press conference, and I'm quoting here, "She won the match not because she played incredible, just because I made all of those mistakes from, like, if you look from the outside, kind of like from an easy ball."
She won the match not because she played incredible, just because I made all of those mistakes from, like, if you look from the outside, kind of like from an easy ball.
Think about that for a moment. Gauff had just won her first Grand Slam title, one of the biggest achievements in tennis, and Sabalenka's response was essentially that Gauff didn't really earn it. Gauff simply made fewer mistakes. To Gauff's credit, she handled it with remarkable grace. She pointed out that going into that final, Sabalenka was the favorite based on recent form. She was the #1 player in the world. And yet Gauff still won. Gauff said, "I think regardless of who I played, I think I had a good shot to win."
Aryna was playing the last few weeks. She was the favorite to win. So I think she was the best person that I could have played in the final. Her being #1 in the world, it was the best person to play. So I think I got the hardest matchup just if you go off stats alone. Obviously, Iga being a champion here, it was going to be a tough match either way. But yeah, I think regardless of who I played, I think I had a good shot to win.
That's the kind of confident, mature response you want to see from a champion. She didn't take the bait or get drawn into a public spat. But Rybakina is built differently. She's not going to let disrespect slide, especially when there are larger issues at play. And here's where the story gets even more interesting. There are reports that the WTA itself may have shown favoritism towards Sabalenka during the tournament. According to multiple sources, Rybakina's coach was removed from the tournament under circumstances that many found suspicious. The timing was convenient, to say the least, coming just as Rybakina was building momentum toward the final. Now, I need to be careful here because we don't have all the facts about why the coach was removed, but the optics were terrible. It looked like the WTA was doing everything possible to tilt the playing field in Sabalenka's favor. And when Rybakina still won despite these obstacles, it makes her victory even more impressive, and her protest even more justified. This is why Rybakina's refusal to take that ceremonial photograph mattered so much. She was sending a message not just to Sabalenka, but to the entire WTA. I won't be silenced, and I won't pretend everything is fine when it's not. Let's zoom out for a moment and talk about what this means for women's tennis. The sport has come so far in terms of professionalism, equality, and respect. We've seen players from all backgrounds rise to the top of the game. Naomi Osaka, Sloane Stephens, Coco Gauff, Qinwen Jing, Iga Swiatek. The WTA Tour is more diverse and global than ever before. But incidents like this remind us that there's still work to be done. When a top player allegedly makes racially charged comments about an opponent, it's not just a personal conflict between two players, it affects the entire culture of the sport. Young players watching from around the world need to see that this behavior has consequences, that the governing bodies will take it seriously, and that victims of such comments will be supported when they speak out. The WTA has issued a statement saying they're investigating the allegations, which is the appropriate first step. But tennis fans, especially those of us who've followed the sport for decades, are watching closely to see what comes next. Will there be real consequences? Or will this be swept under the rug because Sabalenka is one of the tour's biggest stars and most marketable players? There's also something to be said about the pressure these athletes are under. Playing in the WTA Finals championship match, with millions of dollars and ranking points on the line, creates an incredibly stressful environment. Frustration is natural. Every athlete has moments where they struggle with losses. Chris Evert threw her racket. John McEnroe was famous for his outbursts. Even Roger Federer, the gentleman of tennis, had his moments early in his career. But there's a line between competitive frustration and conduct that crosses into disrespect, or worse. You can be angry about losing without dismissing your opponent's achievements. You can be frustrated without making comments that demean someone based on their background or ethnicity. What concerns analysts and longtime tennis observers is that this appears to be a pattern with Sabalenka, not an isolated incident. One bad moment can be forgiven. Everyone has a bad day. But when similar stories emerge after multiple high-profile losses, it suggests something deeper that needs to be addressed. For Rybakina, this controversy has unfortunately overshadowed what should have been a triumphant moment in her career. She won the WTA Finals, one of the most prestigious tournaments in tennis. She defeated the world number 1 decisively in the championship match. She proved that her Wimbledon title wasn't a fluke, that she can perform on the biggest stages when it matters most. Instead of celebrating that achievement, we're talking about alleged racist comments and institutional bias. That's not fair to Rybakina. She did everything right. She prepared, she played brilliantly, she won cleanly. And yet here we are. But I'll say this, Rybakina's decision to stand her ground may end up being just as important as her on-court victory. Sometimes the most courageous thing an athlete can do is refuse to go along with business as usual when something is fundamentally wrong. Rosa Parks didn't give up her seat on that bus. Muhammad Ali refused to be drafted. These are obviously much larger historical moments, but the principle is the same. When you see injustice, you have a choice about whether to accept it silently or to take a stand. Looking ahead, there are real questions about how this affects both players going forward. Will Sabalenka face any formal sanctions? A fine? A suspension? Or will the WTA determine that there isn't enough concrete evidence to take action? And if that happens, what message does it send? For Rybakina, will this impact her relationships with other players on tour? Will sponsors and tournament organizers support her? Or will there be subtle pressure to keep quiet and not rock the boat? These are the kinds of behind-the-scenes dynamics that the public rarely sees but that can significantly impact a player's career. We're also in a moment where tennis is trying to grow in new markets, particularly in the Middle East. The WTA Finals being held in Riyadh was part of that expansion, but when controversies like this emerge, it complicates those efforts. The sport needs to show that it has its house in order, that issues of discrimination and disrespect are taken seriously no matter who's involved. So where does this leave us? The investigation is ongoing. Both players will presumably continue competing in upcoming tournaments. The 2026 season is just around the corner, with the Australian Open in January. Will Sabalenka and Rybakina face each other again soon? And if they do, how will that match be covered and perceived? What I can tell you is that the tennis community is watching closely. Fans have strong opinions on both sides. Some believe Rybakina overreacted, and that this is being blown out of proportion. Others think she didn't go far enough, that she should be calling for stronger action from the WTA. There are people who defend Sabalenka, saying we don't have definitive proof of what she said. And there are people who point to the pattern of behavior, and say that where there's smoke, there's usually fire. Here's what I think. Professional athletes are role models whether they want to be or not. Young players around the world look up to them. And sports at their best teach us about excellence, perseverance, grace in victory, and dignity in defeat. When those values are compromised, it matters. It matters for the sport, and it matters for everyone who loves the game. Tennis has given us so many incredible moments over the years. The Navratilova-Evert rivalry, Steffi Graf's Golden Slam, Serena Williams' dominance. We celebrate these achievements because they represent the best of what sports can be. But we also have to be willing to confront the difficult moments, the controversies that force us to examine whether the sport is living up to its ideals. This situation with Sabalenka and Rybakina is one of those moments. It's uncomfortable. It's messy. There are no easy answers, but ignoring it or pretending it doesn't matter isn't an option. So I want to hear from you. Do you think Rybakina was right to refuse that photograph and make her protest public? Should the WTA have handled the situation differently from the start? And what do you think is fair when it comes to consequences for Sabalenka, assuming the allegations are proven true? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've been following this story and want to stay updated on what happens next, make sure to subscribe to the channel. This is far from over, and we'll be here to cover every development. Thanks for watching.